Welcome to The Rabbit Hole, Politics and Prose, a production of LibertyNation.com, hosted by Mark Angelides.
Tear it all down, we hear. Get rid of racist statues that tie us to our past. This is the rallying cry of thousands of activists, academics, and, of course, self-serving politicos. Yet they're missing the very basics when it comes to statues, art, and history. These strident voices are failing to understand what statues actually are. You see, statues aren't merely depictions of people. They're a representation of the time the person lived and all the good and bad that came with that period of history. But more than this, they're a connection to the past, but not perhaps in the way you might think. When we see a statuesque figure, we assume that it is specifically of the person whose name is on the plinth, but this isn't always the case. Many of the sculptures of the last 400 years have been representations of much earlier ideas. Take Lady Justice. Although herself not a real person, she's a link back to ancient Egypt, most likely the goddess Ma'at, who stood for order. Her sword is a symbol of enforcement and respect. Being unsheathed shows that justice must be transparent. It's also no coincidence that the sword is always double-edged. The blindfold is a more modern addition that we take to mean that justice is blind and therefore impartial. But the earlier meaning, from the 16th century, was that the judicial system at the time was tolerating abuse of the law. For those who protest Lady Justice and say that true justice doesn't exist in modern America, there can be no better symbology than the very figure they're protesting. Does this not seem more like a signpost to the future than a defeated marker of the past? We wear our history upon us, but it is not, as the modern academics would have you believe, to bolster the darkness in the heart of every man, but rather something quite different. In the northeast of England, there's a small city officially called Kingston upon Hull, ubiquitously known just as plain old Hull. This former fishing industry city, it has a somewhat contentious history with statues and signs. The year was 1642 and political strife was high in the country. When King Charles sought to enter the township, he was stopped and denied entry under the orders of the governor, John Hotham. Effectively, this meant that one of the most important coastal regions was siding with Oliver Cromwell and the Roundhead Puritans. It was one of the key events that sparked the English Civil War and led to the eventual beheading of the king. And the relationship with royalty hasn't much improved since then. In 1923, the Hull City Council decided that a statue of Queen Victoria should sit atop of public toilets. It's a grand statue, certainly, but the positioning of it certainly seems most purposeful. In 2017, plaques were put up at a prominent historical site commemorating John Alured and his brother Matthew. John was one of the 59 signatories to King Charles I's death warrant. Historian Rob Robinson noted that, quote, "The plaques reinforce the role and notion of freedom that has always underpinned Hull's history. The Alureds are part and parcel of its history, however brutal," end quote. It's little wonder that the Kingston or Kingstown part of the name is so rarely applied. No discussion of statues or symbology could be complete without tackling the most well-known statue in the world, the Stature of Liberty. Lady Liberty, she's more than just a well-named dame. She's infused with meaning that so few of us know. Yes, she represents America as a beacon of light and freedom, as her proper name, Liberty Enlightening the World, suggests. But there's so much more. At her feet are broken shackles and an axe head. They represent the casting off of oppression. And this was likely modeled after the Roman goddess Libertas, who is associated with the idea of freedom from slavery. In fact, her image was emblazoned on coins after Julius Caesar's assassination. The 7 spikes that make up Liberty's crown in the form of a halo, they represent either the the 7 continents or the 7 seas, depending on who you ask. It is a matter that's up for debate. But the meaning is very clear. She represents people from the world over, every corner of the globe, no matter where. And perhaps the most telling aspect of this famous greeter is that she's not standing still. She's stepping forward, leading the way with her torch as a guiding light. She's not a symbol of things past, but of pushing into the unknown dark, ready to lead all towards safety and freedom. For those who demand that America be reborn upon the ashes of crumbled rocks of her history, they're missing the point. America's statues and symbols are not, and have never been, markers of the past. They're messages to the future. They're not supposed to be snapshots of an era, but rather markers along a path that has not yet ended. With Lady Liberty's forward step, she's telling us that together we're on a journey. Lady Justice gives us a moral truth that her sword cuts both ways, and that she's there not to defend just man against man, but the weak against the strong, regardless of consequence. We don't need a reinventing of American symbology. The destroyers, whether activists or government lackeys, they're ignorant of the history and the future they hold in their hands. It's their own blindness and lack of foresight that pushes them to demand that we tear down the relics of the past, because they don't understand that these monuments, these works of art and beauty, do not glorify a diseased history. They inspire us towards a better future.
Who are we? We are Americans that believe in liberty. We are a project of the nonprofit One Generation Away. We are patriots who apply the founding principles to the issues of today.
And they keep moving the goalposts on us.
We are educators and commentators who love America and the Constitution. Who are we? We are Liberty Nation.
The Rabbit Hole, Politics and Prose, a LibertyNation.com production.
Available at Libsyn, Apple iTunes, Stitcher, on Roku, and other fine podcast providers.